Committee, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the 23rd EuroCALL Conference called Communities and Cultures, here in Lemesos, as we call it. This is how it all started. Last year in Padova, in Italy, at the end of the 22nd EuroCALL Conference, we were given the EuroCALL flag and the challenging responsibility to organize the next conference. We hope, in Limassol. Today we meet in Lemesos, the second largest city in Cyprus. Situated on the south coast, it offers both its inhabitants and its visitors a blend of historical and contemporary cultural and intercultural experiences, and combines industry, arts and festivals and entertainment, the perfect ingredients that complete the recipe of a fulfilling and productive experience. Lemesos is an ideal destination not only for holidays, but for conferences such as EuroCALL. Our venue, St. Raphael Hotel, combines both in the most pleasant manner. Cyprus University of Technology, the hosting university, is one of the 7 universities and one of the 3 public universities in the Republic of Cyprus. The university's 6 schools blend a variety of fields ranging from communication and media, fine and applied arts, technical sciences and environmental management, management and economics, health sciences, engineering and technology, and language learning and teacher education with the use of new technologies. This year, the conference is organized by Cyprus University of Technology Language Center. The Language Center's main areas of teaching and learning are language learning for specific purposes, language teacher education, and core, new technologies integrated in all language teaching programs. And as many of you know, we also offer an online Master in CALL program. The Cyprus University of Technology Language Center staff have been active members of EuroCALL for many years as presenters, Teacher Education SIG 2015 organizers, conference reviewers, participants, paper presenters, and writers for the different publications of EuroCALL. A lot through this active involvement and participation, and we continuously integrate our learning in our practice. We have also learned immensely from the organization of this conference. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the EuroCALL Association Executive Committee for entrusting us with the organization of this year's conference. Special thanks to Tony Patton, EuroCALL Association Secretary, Hedy Talas, Program Committee Chair, and Saika Jagged, EuroCALL 2014 Organizer, with their constant help and support. Keynote speakers. A conference cannot do without them. Our keynote speakers, experts in their fields, who honored us with their acceptance to join us and challenge us with their inspiring work. Associate Professor Mark Pegro from the University of Western Australia, Professor Panagiotis Zafiris from Cyprus University of Technology, and Associate Professor Lila Kaji from the University of Johannesburg, South Africa. Each one of our speakers offers a different perspective on CALL, communities, and culture. We have another group of people who are very important and indispensable for events like this one. our supporters, sponsors, exhibitors. Emented, Cyprus Tourism Organization, Passion for Success, Cyprus Convention Europe, Austrian Airlines, and exhibitors Legal Pro, and Research Foundation Net, and our suppliers, Art Design, Legal and Latin Strategy. And of course, all of you, lecturers, practitioners, participants, that back on your presentation. It's time for another activity. You are the driving force for the association here. I would also like to highlight my Language Center team, consisting of 31 members. They have all supported the idea of organizing the conference from the very beginning. They collaborated with dedication and team spirit and have made every effort to make this event a memorable one for all. The Language Center team has been heavily supported by another, I should say their names very quickly. Thank you very much, Maro, Panayota, Ellis, Christina, Antigone, Epithia, Olga, Jack, Nicoletta, Maria, Ioanna, Tasula, Dimitris, Andrula, Georgia, Kotini, Olga, Vasos, Monique, Skevi, Panayotis, Elena, Christina, Sabrula, Anna, Maria, Costas, Tesula, Katerina, Maria, Victoria, Salo, Evi. All Greek names to you, I know. Here they are. We just had a photo 5 minutes ago. The Language Center team has been heavily supported by another 2 very dedicated teams. A team of 16 students who are dealing with all the media support of the conference. They constitute a fantastic crew under the leadership of our colleague Dimitrios Voglu. Michali, Luca, Amalia, Lambro, Giorgo, Apostole, Kyriako, Nicola, Ridiki, Mirofora, Harula, Costandine, Beriti, Andrea, Francesca, Cristina. Thank you very, very much. You can see them in the orange t-shirts at the back and at the front. They are dealing with streaming, with photos, with video taping, and they're going to be uploading on a daily basis the photos that they're taking. And at the end of the conference, during the closing ceremony, they are going to give us a glimpse in video form of the whole conference. Here they are. This conference team, led by Petros Radis, I'm sure you must have come across him, that tall guy who is everywhere. This team has been the backbone of the conference logistics. I will say one thing about them. If you have a conference to organize, trust me, choose Easy Conference. They know how to make a conference easy, that's for sure. Petros, Melita, Mary, Sonia, Oriana, Kyriakos, Marios, Lula, Maria, and Dushan. Thank you so much. Very special thanks also to my colleague Elena Papa. Where are you, Elena? Can you stand up, please? She has been the quiet achiever all along in the last 6 months. She has constructed the conference program and has been continuously responding to everyone's request for program changes, even just a minute ago. Elena, you have been a conference saver. And I could not, of course, forget the co-organizer of the event, Dr. Fernando Loizidis, who has kept a close look at aspects as serious as the budget and as important as the menu for the gala dinner. Where are you, Fernando? And all of you coming from so many different countries, from Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, China, Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Egypt, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Iceland, Iran, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Netherlands, New Zealand, Oman, Poland, Qatar, Russia, South Africa, South Korea, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Taiwan, Turkey, United Kingdom, United States, and Japan. Thank you all for coming and for showing your interest and support in the EuroCALL Association, in the conference, and in the use of new technologies in language teaching and learning. Some statistics. As you can see, we have 169 presentations in different types and people. We have around about 135 participants, and then the breakdown of different people working for the conference. At this point, I would like to ask Dr. Françoise Blanc, President of the EuroCALL Association, to officially open the conference.
Well, on behalf of EuroCALL and the executive committee that I'm going to introduce to you very shortly, I would like to thank Salome and her team and the conference for a wonderful venue, wonderful conference organization. Some of us have arrived a couple of days ago. We are not too sure whether we're at the conference or on holidays. The mix of both things is absolutely wonderful. And thank you so much for all of you to be here today. I hope that the program will be stimulating. By any means, do take advantage of the sea, the pool, or whatever. I was told though that between 10 and 5, you better be inside that session, because we're going to burn everything. So, no. Stay cool, attend the presentations, discuss, share everything with others. I'm going now to introduce the executive committee. Those people are very often invisible. Is there a nickel? But if you have any question, this is your association, your organization, so please do come to any of us with suggestions, questions. So I'm going, they're all sitting there, so I'm going to start with Peggy Talas, who is the current Vice President. Tony Patton, who unfortunately had a little incident a few days ago, so she's on crutches. She knows everything about the association. She's our Secretary General. So if you have any questions about membership, anything, go to Tony. Beside Peggy, we've got Orana. And next to her, somebody really important because he's the one who manages your money and ours, the association, the treasurer, John Gillespie. Behind him, we have Saki, never organized local development company. Miriam Hau, Rosa, Alex. He's also the co-editor of Ritual with me, so if you have any questions about publications or whatever, do contact us during the conference. And behind Francesca, and the last person who I want to introduce is Kate, who has just joined the committee yesterday, so she's going to organize the next EuroCALL conference, but she will tell you much more on Saturday. So, and Kent, where is Kent? Kent is not here, just yeah. So all those people are working very hard between conferences, not just organize conferences, but to run the association, look after the finance, try to launch new initiatives to support your work as researchers, developers, or practitioners. On Thursday, we've got an AGM. Most of you are members of EuroCALL because you have to be a member of EuroCALL or a sister organization to attend the conference. So please do come to the AGM if you want to hear more about this organization, if you want to get involved, because we can't do it without you. And the idea is to respond to your current and future needs. So without the membership input, there's very little we can do. So please do come to the AGM on Thursday, and that way we'll get some verbs. So we are now, without further ado, I'm declaring this conference open. I really hope that you're going to have a very stimulating few days here in the US.
I talked to you before about that tall guy who's behind the scene. Well, I'm going to ask him to come in front and talk to you a little bit about housekeeping. That was fun. This is a compliment.
Just very quickly, Jenna, we'll try to make your life as easy as possible. And I just want to give you some housekeeping notes. And we'll try to update you every day in the morning of any changes up to that moment. With regards to the timetable, please check the timetable online for any last-minute changes, and also on the doors of each session there will be the updated program with any changes that might have happened. So please check those ways for any changes. There will be a group photo for the whole conference, and because we are trying to fit everybody in that photo, we are going to hold it down by the amphitheater, which is next to the pool on the right of the building. What we have agreed with Salome is that we'll do that at the end of the coffee break on Friday, the 26th. So we all meet Thursday. Sorry, I apologize. I need Salome to correct me. Yes, on Thursday. Yes, I didn't meet here. On Thursday at the end of the coffee break, and we'll walk down from the lobby down to where the pictures will take place.
What time? What time?
It's around 5:30. Great.
After the general meeting, it's after the general meeting, you should all be there, and then we'll have a nice coffee, and then we'll go for the photo, okay?
She does it better than me, but she wants me to.
5:30.
It's 5:30.
Okay. In the website, if you follow the link virtual extension, there's a drop-down box with photos, social media, and streaming links, so you can go there for any updated information. In case of any problems at any given moment, you can always come to the registration desk and talk to us, either myself or someone else from our team, or you can always call whatever time it is, 24/7, or at the 24-hour number that we gave you on the general email that we sent to you. There is a number there, it's a mobile number. Wherever you are, just call us immediately if there is a problem. Lastly, the symposium tomorrow, the role of teachers, that was supposed to take place between 11 and 1:25, has been moved and has become a normal session, and it will be held on Friday, the 26th, between 12:30 and 1 o'clock, and it's session 6-4D. That's all I had until now. Please let me know if there's anything else we can do to make your participating at the conference impeccable, and if we can make your stay extra special in Cyprus. Have a great time in Cyprus.
Okay. The next thing we have is, of course, starting the official, starting with the keynote speaking. As you know, the conference has already started this morning with the 4 workshops. Thank you to all the workshop presenters and to the participants for their interest in the workshop topics. Before we move to the keynote address, I would like you to be 2 minutes patient, because the crew here needs 2 minutes to organize the next stream. Okay? So please let me know when you're ready. Meanwhile, if you see people with this tag, the small tag, it's the Language Center staff. They will be co-chairing all sessions, and also they will be around just in case you need any help anywhere in the premises. Okay? Hello everyone, we are ready. This is useful information for you regarding the social media. You can find them on the website, and you can use the links to get there. And we now move on to the next activity of the conference, which is the keynote address. Mark Pegram, who came all the way from Perth, Australia, to be with us today. I have known Mark for some years now. I have been following his work and we have become good friends. Mark is an associate professor in the Faculty of Education of the University of Western Australia, where he specializes in mobile learning and more broadly in e-learning. His teaching has been recognized through Faculty and University Excellence in Teaching Awards, as well as a National Australian Learning and Teaching Council Excellence in Teaching Award. His current research focuses on mobile technologies and digital literacies. His recent books include Brave New Classrooms, Democratic Education and the Internet, co-edited with Joe Lockhart, Peter Lang, 2007, From Blocks to Bombs, The Future of Digital Technologies in Education, 2009, Digital Literacies, co-authored with Gavin Dudley and Nikki Hockley, 2013, and Mobile Learning Languages, Literacies and Cultures, 2014. He's an associate editor of the International Journal of Virtual and Personal Learning Environments, a member of the editorial boards of Language Learning and Technology and System, and a member of the review panel of the International Journal of Pedagogy and Learning. He currently teaches in Perth, Hong Kong, and Singapore. I don't know how you do that. And has given presentations and run seminars on e-learning, now I know, and learning in Australia, New Zealand, Asia and the Middle East, the UK and Europe and South America. Further details can be found on his wiki. So I would like to invite Mark Pegram to give us some of his wisdom. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you very much, Salome. 13 years ago, I was a fairly young academic in my first lecturing position in the UK, and I attended my first international conference. I remember being extremely nervous about presenting my paper, although in the event, the feedback from the 4 or 5 people in the room was fairly gentle and fairly positive. Okay, so a bit better? Right. So yes, the feedback was fairly gentle and fairly positive. But even more than that, what I remember is being impressed by the range and breadth and depth of the papers that I saw, especially the keynote presentations. That conference 13 years ago was actually EuroCALL, which in the year 2003 took place in Limerick, in Ireland. So it's a great honour to have been asked today to give the opening keynote presentation at this year's EuroCALL here in sunny Cyprus. And I hope to be able to share with you even a little of the breadth and the depth that I remember so well from the papers at that initial conference and from subsequent conferences. The theme of this year's EuroCALL is called Communities and Culture. I'm going to take a fairly specific perspective on CALL by focusing on MORE, which, as I'm sure most of you know, stands for Mobile Assisted Language Learning. And I'm going to take a very broad perspective on communities and cultures and look at both of them in plural. I want to talk to you this afternoon about why mobile devices, despite all of their promise, are not in and of themselves enough. To suggest that as educators, we have an important role to play in explicitly drawing our students' attention to the many ways in which they can use their everyday mobile to support language learning, community building, and cultural and intercultural exploration. But first, I need to start off with a quick apology, and it's an apology for showing this cheesy photo of me within the first couple of minutes of my presentation. Actually, this photo was taken together with an American friend in an Israeli restaurant in the Japanese capital Tokyo a couple of months ago when I was there to do a keynote at EuroCALL. You can probably see it's a Facebook post. And wrapped up in this Facebook post are lots of the key themes that I want to talk to you about this afternoon. I used the mobile device to take these photos and to post them to Facebook. There were different types of learning going on, including, as it happens, learning of both the Japanese and Chinese language. There was community building around the post, And given the topic of the post, a lot of the discussion was about culture and intercultural issues. I may not be pleased to know that right at the end of my presentation today, I'm going to show you that photo again. And I'll talk to you at that point about how these various things emerge through this multimodal cultural artifact. But before then, we have a little journey to go on. I want to commence that journey with a brief history of mobile learning. And from there, we'll go on to look at the three main types of mobile learning that we see in evidence in the world around us today. And as I talk about the introduction of mobile devices into education, I'll be talking about how they can be used to support language learning, community building, and cultural and intercultural exploration. From there, we'll move on to the three main agendas that underpin mobile learning initiatives around the world today. And because 3 is a nice number, I thought we'd stick with 3. And I'm going to wrap up with 3 brief case studies of very successful mobile language and literacy learning projects from different parts of the planet, so that we can see how these types and these agendas work in practice. When it comes to history, you don't have to go very far back in time to find an era when computers, and even as late as the 1960s or 70s was taken, they were the size of this IBM monster. So in a few short decades, we've gone from very large computers like this to rather more sleek and streamlined desktop computers like this. And I'm sure that many of you have a computer like this on your desk at home or in the office. Of course, that's not the end of the story, because in recent years we've seen a proliferation of other types of devices, notably laptop computers, and there are plenty of these in evidence around the conference today. Neither is that the end of the story, because in even more recent years we've seen a proliferation of even more mobile devices. I'm sure you can imagine I'm talking about tablets, and again I've spotted 1 or 2 of these already at the conference. Actually, tablets are interesting because in many ways they're descended less from desktop and laptop computers and more from mobile phones. Now, there's another area where we've seen incredibly rapid development in an incredibly short space of time. Believe it or not, these are precursors to today's mobile phones. I'm sure you agree with me, you get pretty good exercise carrying these things around. With computers, in a few short decades, we've gone from large, clunky devices like these to slightly less large, less clunky devices like this. You might remember these from the 90s, or maybe you'll still see them in late-night reruns of drama series on TV. Nowadays, of course, our mobile phones tend to look a bit more like this recent iPhone from Apple, or this Samsung Android phone. It's interesting to note that according to current projections, we are soon going to reach a point where half of the world's population has internet access. And if we look specifically, we can see here that is projected to happen in the year 2018. It's also interesting to note that among the people who are now coming online, as well as among the people who are staying online, that's us, the trend is away from using desktop and laptop computers and towards using mobile devices to access the internet. That's true in the developing world, where we're mostly talking about basic feature phones, which are more affordable and more accessible than desktop or laptop computers. And it's also true in the developed world, where we're mostly talking about smartphones, which are seen as more convenient and more flexible than desktop or laptop computers. I have some figures here this year showing that as of January 2016, some 39% of global web traffic was coming from mobile phones, a lot of it from smartphones, and some 5% was coming from tablets. So already in January this year, some 44% of global web traffic was coming from mobile devices. You can bet that that figure is a lot higher now, and you can bet that by January 2017, it will have surpassed 50%. In this chart here, about a third of the way across, you can see a white bar, which represents the global average of 39% of web traffic coming from mobile phones. Among the countries to the left, which have a higher than global average proportion of web traffic coming from mobile phones, we find a number of developing nations, for example, Nigeria, Indonesia, India. But we also find highly developed countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Singapore. So, notwithstanding differences in the hardware being used, the trend globally in the developing and the developed world is the same. It's towards the use of mobile devices to access the internet, and that opens up some very important educational possibilities. When we look at mobile learning initiatives around the world today, it's possible to identify at least three main kinds of mobile learning. First up, we have mobile learning where the devices are mobile, indeed they're mobile by definition, but the learners and the learning experience are not. So a typical example here would be a connected classroom. More and more educational institutions, instead of paying to upgrade hardware computer labs, are choosing to buy in class sets of tablets. It's important that the devices are mobile. They can be moved from classroom to classroom as needed, but while students are learning with them, they're typically sitting still at a desk, much as they would with a desktop or a laptop computer. So in that sense, not much has changed. We often see the same thing when the devices become the classroom, as they often do in distance learning. So we know that for many distance learners, a tablet or a mobile phone is their gateway to an online learning platform. But they're typically not wandering around with their devices while they're studying. They're sitting still in one place, at home or in the office, where they can concentrate. Again, it's important that the devices are mobile. They can be moved easily from home to the office and back again. But while the learning is taking place, neither the learners nor the learning experience are mobile. At this level, if we're thinking about language education, there is scope primarily for language learning itself. There's not as much scope for community building or for cultural exploration. But what if we take things up a notch? What if we make the learners mobile? So imagine the teacher in that connected classroom saying to the students, okay, when you learn something new, when you find something out on your tablet that you didn't know before, I want you to get up from your desk, take your tablet with you, and go and explain what you've learned to 2 or 3 of your classmates. Get them to ask you questions about it. Now, we're introducing a very minimal amount of mobility here, but it's really important. It's the kind of active, collaborative, constructivist learning that can be very difficult to set up in a hardwired computer lab. Or imagine our distance learner actually learning on the go, on the bus or the train home from work. And maybe it's only because he or she is able to fill those spaces of downtime in everyday life or study that he or she can take a course of study in the first place. So in both of these cases, the learners are mobile, albeit in rather different ways. But the learning experience itself is still not mobile, in the sense that it remains unchanged, unaffected by the different spaces and environments through which the students are moving. At this level, if we're thinking about language education, there is still scope for language learning, of course, but there's rather more scope for community building. And we see that perhaps most often when students are geographically scattered. But what if we take things up one more notch? What if we make the learning experience itself mobile? So again, imagine the teacher in that connected classroom saying to the students, okay, this time I want you to get outside the classroom. I want you to walk around the local town. I want you to take photos of historical buildings. Find out who built them and when. Annotate your photos with that information, and then upload them to the class platform where your peers can comment. Suddenly, the real-world environment is feeding directly into the learning experience. It's becoming part of the learning experience. We sometimes see the same thing with just-in-time learning, whether in push or pull mode. But perhaps the ultimate examples from the cutting edge of contemporary educational technology development are to be found in the area of augmented reality learning. Some of you will have seen images like this one before. This is the Wikitube augmented reality browser. It's been opened up on a smart device which is being held up to a London street scene. It's looking through the viewfinder of the camera at the street scene, and then it's annotating our view of the street with all kinds of key information that can then be used to scaffold our interactions with our surroundings. Let's take a jump halfway across the world to the Singaporean CBD. This again is the YouTube augmented reality browser. The gentleman over on the left-hand side is wearing augmented reality glasses. So the annotations that you see floating over this landscape, he would be seeing on the lenses of his glasses. That's the only element of this image which is not yet widely commercially available, but we expect it to be within the next few years. For the moment, everything else that you see here can be done by taking your smartphone, holding it up to the landscape around you, and reading the annotations off the screen. Now, what's important about these annotations is that they are not just text-based. They are quite clearly multimodal artifacts. So over on the right-hand side, there's a video about the nearby Singapore River, which you can play if you so choose. Directly in front of him, you can see the pathway he needs to follow to get to the New Asia Bar. Over on the left-hand side, there's a car advertisement that's virtually come to life. It's generated a three-dimensional simulation. So there's real potential here for getting our students involved in situated, embedded, embodied learning, where they go out into real-world contexts and learn directly from those contexts, potentially with the support of digital annotations left there by their teachers or other educators. But it's not just about students passively receiving information, because students can also be asked to create their own digital multimodal annotations, geotagged to real-world locations that can later be visited by teachers, peers, or indeed the wider public. So at this level, if we are thinking about language education, of course, there is still scope for language learning itself. There is still scope for community building. But there is a lot of scope as well for cultural and intercultural exploration in authentic real-world contexts. It's probably evident as we look across those three levels that we are talking about very different levels of technological sophistication tied to very different levels of pedagogical sophistication. That's why we as educators need to make decisions about which technologies to promote and which pedagogies to promote through those technologies on the basis of the settings in which we find ourselves. At the first level, we might be talking about tablets, but very often we're talking about more basic technologies like basic feature phones. And very often we're talking about traditional pedagogies like information transmission or behaviorism. That first level is most often most relevant in developing world contexts and in under-resourced contexts in the developed world. But for those of us who are lucky enough to work in better resource contexts, we should be thinking as often as possible about how to drive our mobile learning designs towards the second and ideally the third and most sophisticated level, because that's where students can get involved in active, collaborative, constructivist learning. That's where they can get involved in situated, embedded, embodied learning. That's where there is scope for language learning itself and for community building and for cultural and intercultural exploration. We can emphasize the sophistication of that third level a little bit more if we map some other well-known mobile digital learning frameworks to this three-level framework. Some of you will probably know the mobile pedagogical framework from Kevin Burton and Matthew Kearney. They identify three key dimensions of mobile learning, namely personalization, collaboration, and authenticity. Some of you may also know the recent model established by Lindsay Clanfield and Jill Hadfield in their forthcoming book, where they distinguish between weak interaction and strong interaction. Weak interaction, they say, is when a student is interacting with a machine, but strong interaction is when a student is interacting with other human beings. So if we now go back to that three-level framework and start with the first level where devices are mobile, but the learners and the learning experience are not, what we see is that there is primarily scope for personalization, and there is primarily scope for weak interaction. Often at this level, we're talking about students working individually with their devices and interacting with some kind of app or platform. At At the second level, where both the devices and the learners are mobile, but the learning experience is not yet mobile, we see that there is still scope for personalization, but there is much more scope for collaboration, whether that collaboration is happening through the devices or around the devices. There is scope for both weak and strong interaction. At the third level, where the devices, the learners, and the learning experience are all mobile, there is, of course, continued scope for personalization and collaboration, but there's much more scope for authenticity, where students are learning in real-world settings, and therefore there is continued scope for both weak and strong interaction. Okay. Having now looked at the three main types of mobile learning, let's move on to the three main agendas that underpin that mobile learning initiative. In talking about the three main types of mobile learning, we're really answering the question, how? How do we do mobile learning? In looking at the three main agendas, we're answering the question, why? Why would we want to do mobile learning in the first place? The first agenda for introducing mobile devices into education involves transforming teaching and learning. I imagine that many of you will have heard of the TPAC framework from Mishra and Kohler and the SAMA model from Ruben Petadura. These two models are often being used in conjunction in teacher training and development programs around the world nowadays as a way of getting teachers to think about how to use new technologies, not only mobile technologies, but increasingly including mobile technologies, in order to transform their students' learning. But what do we actually mean by transforming learning? Well, to answer that question, we have to take a step back for a moment from these three agendas and have a look at the diagram, which is called, somewhat scarily, the epistemological continuum, but it's not as bad as it sounds, I promise. Epistemology, as many of you know, is just the study of knowledge, how we come to know things. And a continuum, of course, is a range. So all this is saying is there's a range of opinions about the nature of knowledge. And of course, it follows that if there's a range of opinions about the nature of knowledge, there's going to be a range of opinions about the best way or ways to do education. Time does not permit us to go into great detail here, so briefly, let me say that people whose perspectives are situated towards the left-hand side of the spectrum tend to hold with an objectivist conception of knowledge. And it follows from that objectivist conception that one of the main jobs of the teacher is seen as being to go out into the world, to collect a subset of the objective knowledge that's out there, to bring that back into the classroom in his or her head, and then to transmit it into the heads of the students, which is of course what we call an information transmission model of education. Usually, once that process has been undertaken, the teacher will test the students to see how well the information has been transmitted and how well it's being retained. Nowadays, an information transmission approach to education is often accompanied by another newer approach known as a behaviourist approach, which is about mastery of content or skills through repetition, often linked to rewards and punishments. Now, if we visualise an information transmission classroom, we will probably have something like this image in our minds. It looks rather old-fashioned, right? But you know what? If we were to put this image in colour and update the clothing a little bit, and in some countries at least change the blackboards for whiteboards, we would soon see that there are many, many classrooms in the world that still look very much like this. Now, that's not to say that there is no place in education for information transmission or behaviourism. Clearly there is, especially at foundational levels of learning, where there is an acquired or an agreed upon body of knowledge to be acquired. But what we've realised over the course of the 20th century and into the 21st is that that should not be the whole story of learning. And so, over the last 100, 120 years, we've seen a massive shift of focus towards the other end of the spectrum. Again, briefly, people whose perspectives are situated towards the right-hand side of the spectrum tend to hold with a more constructivist conception of knowledge. And it follows from that constructivist conception that the job of the teacher cannot be to transmit objective knowledge into the heads of the students, Rather, it's the responsibility of each student to construct their own mental map, their own mental representation of reality. The role of the teacher is that of a facilitator. So in other words, the teacher is there to help each student construct their own knowledge. And the teacher does that by providing input, by offering resources, by structuring tasks and activities, by setting up pair work and group work and so on. And actually, it's through those communicative, collaborative activities that students are able to bring their mental maps of reality closer to those of their peers and to that of the teacher. What we've seen happen over the last 40 to 50 years in particular is the rise of all kinds of educational approaches and frameworks which are not the same as each other. There are certainly differences between these, but what they do have in common is they're all situated towards the right-hand side of that spectrum. They're all based on the idea that it is the student's responsibility to construct their own knowledge. And they're all predicated on the notion that the role of the teacher is that of a facilitator. So the approach the way the one setting the keyword for these social constructors. Send it to the regional work, brushing and in fact, many people say that these constructions are just ways Now we issue a bunch of problem-based inquiry-based we probably have information regional writing this one in our minds. This is a school down in Europe. And you can see young learners here working in very different configurations, so individually, in pairs, in small groups. Here are some older students at the same school working in what has come to be called a new learning space. And these new learning spaces are typically underpinned by robust Wi-Fi connectivity, so that students can bring their mobile devices with them and access the information channels and communication channels that they need. Of course, the fact that they have access to digital equipment doesn't mean there's no role for more traditional analog tools like pens and paper. Those have their place as well. At higher education level, this is what a new learning space might look like. This is a photo which I took at King Mongkut's University in Bangkok early last year when I was doing some work there. It's a new learning space for science students. So you can see a couple of girls collaborating in the foreground. In the background are a couple of boys who just finished, they just wrapped up the collaboration. And within this larger space, there are lots of smaller spaces where students can teach and learn from each other. And indeed, teaching and learning from each other is one of the fundamental tenets of these kinds of educational approaches. So this is the first agenda for introducing mobile devices into education. It's about pushing learning in a direction which is more active, more collaborative, more constructivist, more situated. There is a second agenda, and it's about developing 21st century skills. I imagine that many of you will have heard of the American Partnership for 21st Century Skills, perhaps the preeminent organisation working in this area. They promote skills like communication, collaboration, and creativity. In my own recent work on digital literacy, together with a couple of co-authors, Gavin Juni and Nikki Ockley, we have argued that it's absolutely vital nowadays to foster the digital literacies necessary to use digital technologies effectively to support the development of exactly these kinds of skills. So we looked already at the epistemological continuum. It's important to say that when these types of educational approaches are adopted, a lot of space is naturally opened up for students to develop skills like communication, collaboration, creativity, and so on. Skills that are sometimes called graduate attributes or transferable skills, or which are known by the name that I've been using, namely 21st century skills. It's also important to mention that these skills need to be developed against a background of growing, increasing diversity in many areas of our lives, in our urban spaces and our online spaces. Diversity of all the kinds that you can see flagged up here in this model, which comes from an organisation called Diversity Australia. In fact, there is so much diversity nowadays in our urban spaces, in our online spaces, that we've recently seen the coining of a new term, which you may have come across before, called superdiversity. Superdiversity is about the diversification of diversity, which is going on in urban and online spaces. It's about the corner shop cosmopolitanism, which all of us need to develop just to get things done in the ordinary places we go to in our cities and on the ordinary social media platforms that we use online. In some ways, we can say that superdiversity has arisen or is arising at the point of intersection between mobile people and mobile text. And interestingly, recently there's been something of a shift of focus from spatial mobility to semiotic mobility. A recognition that all of us, that's us and our students, we all need a whole suite of linguistic skills and cultural and intercultural skills and 21st century skills and digital literacies just to be able to live and operate effectively in today's urban and online environments. So that's the second agenda for introducing mobile devices into education. There is a third agenda, and it's a social justice agenda. This agenda is about getting mobile devices into the hands of as many people as possible, and through those devices spreading educational opportunities, particularly to traditionally underserved populations. And you're probably aware of some of the fantastic work being done in this area by organisations like UNESCO, based in Paris, and the GSMA, based in London. It's probably evident, once again, looking across those three levels, that we are talking about very different levels of technological sophistication tied to very different levels of pedagogical sophistication. That third level, the social justice level, often involves basic technologies like basic feature phones and traditional pedagogies like information transmission and behaviourism. It is most often most relevant in a developing world context or in under-resourced context in the developed world. But in line with what I said earlier, for those of us who are lucky enough to work in better resource contexts, in this case, we should be thinking about how those first two agendas can help us to enrich the mobile learning experiences that we're creating for our students. Okay, so now that we've looked at the three main types of mobile learning and the three main agendas for mobile learning, let's go on to look at three cases of very successful mobile language and literacy learning projects from different parts of the planet, so that we can see how these types and these agendas work in practice. We're going to kick off in North Africa with the British Council's Learn English SMS project, which ran from 2009 to 2013 in Sudan and from 2013 to 2015 in Libya. There is a new and more sophisticated version of the project about to begin in Sudan, and discussions are underway in Libya about restarting the version of the project there. At its height, the Sudanese branch of this project had some 65,000 monthly subscribers, and as of April 2014, the Libyan version had 60,000 monthly subscribers. So this was not a small project. It was very much an English language learning project. So subscribers would receive a certain number of SMS messages, that is text messages each week, in fact 4 a week in Sudan in Libya. And those messages would contain an item of vocabulary with an explanation, or a grammar point, or a study tip. So this was very much about information transmission in push mode, so going out through those SMS messages. In Sudan, there were also behaviour-style quizzes available in pull mode, that is to say they could be requested by subscribers, but that functionality was never available in Libya due to the limitations of telecommunications infrastructure. It was very much the BYOD project, a bring your own device project, in the sense that participants were responsible for supplying their own hardware, generally basic feature phones, and they were responsible for their own connections. So this is a project which was very much about a social justice agenda. It was about getting English language learning into the hands of as many people as possible, particularly people who had had few, if any, such opportunities in the past. The devices were mobile, obviously by definition, but the learners and the learning experience not so much. But by working within that restricted framework, the British Council was able to reach tens of thousands of interested learners. And actually the reach of this project is one of its most impressive features. So the Council found a way to work across the geographical and security limitations of North Africa, where it's not always safe for Council staff to travel outside the capital cities. Just as importantly, they found a way to work within the technological and economic context of the region. So from a technological point of view, this project involves basic technologies. From a pedagogical point of view, it involves traditional pedagogies. If we think about this in terms of language education, there was a scope primarily for language learning itself, and not much scope for community building or cultural exploration. But this project was absolutely appropriate for this target group of learners in this target context. Okay, let's jump continents and go to South America, specifically to Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, where the iPads for Access project has been running since 2012, 4 years ahead of the Rio Olympics. It's been run at the Casa Thomas Jefferson, which is a large English language teaching college. It was funded originally by the US State Department, and it was intended to benefit 104 Access students. These are students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, but who've shown a gift for learning English. Ultimately, though, the project came to benefit the 17,000 regular students at Casa Thomas Jefferson. It is a project about the English language, but from the beginning, it wasn't just about teaching the students the language itself. It was about helping them to develop digital literacies as a kind of gateway to 21st century skills. The format, teacher-selected and increasingly student-selected iOS apps, that is, Apple apps, being used on more than 200 iPads in class sets. And it's these that were initially funded by the US State Department and which are now being funded in an ongoing way by Casa Thomas Jefferson itself. Very early on, there was the introduction of the BYOD model, where the staff and the regular students were encouraged to purchase Apple devices at subsidized prices and to bring them into the classroom to support teaching and learning. This year has seen the inauguration of the Makerspace, which has broadened the range of digital literacies that the students are able to develop to include things like programming and coding literacy, robotics, and 3D printing. So this is a project with a hybrid agenda. On the one hand, there is the social justice agenda. It's about reaching those socioeconomically disadvantaged students. But as I've said already, from the start, it wasn't just about teaching them the language. It was about helping them to develop digital literacies and through those 21st century skills. The project did ultimately become about the 21st century skills of all of the students at Casa Thomas Jefferson. And then it was realized that in order to open up the maximum scope for students to develop these kinds of skills, it was necessary for teachers to shift their pedagogy. And that's really where the emphasis has been over the last 2 to 3 years on teacher training and development. So this is a project where the devices are mobile, but so too are the learners. They move all the time around the classroom and around the campus as they interact, collaborate, and create together. It's a project which, like the British Council's project in North Africa, has a certain reach. It has managed to reach those socioeconomically disadvantaged students. And it's also a project which functions as a kind of proof of concept. It shows that it is possible to teach digital literacies and 21st century skills at the same time as teaching other kinds of content and skills, including language. From a pedagogical point of view, Carla Arena, who runs the project in Brasilia, tells me that she has seen shifting attitudes to BYOD technology integration amongst her staff, and she reports real pockets of success in shifting learning in a direction where it becomes more active, more collaborative, and more constructivist. Every year at my university, the University of Western Australia, I run quite a large undergraduate course called A World of Mobile Learning, where we help students to see how they can use their mobile devices to support their learning in a whole range of different subjects. As part of my online lectures in this course, I have a number of guest presenters, and Carla Arena from Brasilia is one of them. And I'd like to share with you some comments that she made to this year's report for students. Now what I see, she says, is that the students have a powerhouse in their hands. Yes, she's talking about iPads, but she's also talking about any other mobile devices that students are able to use on a regular basis. She goes on. And there is so much they can do. They can really be creators of content of all kinds. So they can be DJs, they can be video producers, they can be storytellers, showing the world the stories that they want to tell about their communities, about their classes, about their life in general. So in this project, there is clearly scope for language learning itself, but there is also scope for community building, and there is scope for cultural and even intercultural exploration. All right, let's do one final jump and go back to Singapore, where the mobile augmented reality heritage trails have been under development since 2008 by the company LDR, working with the backing of the Ministry of Education. As of July 2016, last month, some 200,000 student and adult participants had taken one of the mobile augmented reality learning trails created by LDR. Around half of those would have been student participants on the heritage trails, which we're focused on here. These heritage trails are available in English, Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil. And the focus is, and I want to focus exactly because it comes from LDR, the focus is inquiry-based learning integrated with language and literacy, 21st century skills, and digital literacies. Beyond the student-level trails, there are also trails for adult learners, as I mentioned. They have a range of wider aims, including things like self-directed and collaborative learning, leadership, team building, and community bonding. So of the 130 mobile augmented reality trails created by LDR, 39 are the heritage trails used at school level. The way these trails work is this. Students go out into the streets of Singapore in teams, and each team has a GPS-enabled mobile device that, of course, knows where they are and can direct them to the next station on whichever learning trail they're taking. When they arrive there, the device can push information to them. It might be text-based information, but very often it involves images and videos. So this is to help to contextualize students' cultural and historical understanding of Singapore. That gets pushed to them. They also get tasks pushed to them. The first layer of tasks consists of activities which are pedagogically fairly traditional, based largely on information transmission. For example, identify the person that you see in the statue over on your left-hand side, type the name into the system, and you will receive immediate automated feedback about whether you're correct. But the second layer of activities consists of tasks that are pedagogically rather more ambitious. For example, interview at least 3 shopkeepers in this street about the events which occurred on this spot 20 years ago. When you found out what happened, with your group, reenact a key conversation that you imagine taking place during these events. Film it. Edit the film down to 10 seconds and then upload it to the class platform where your peers can comment. So as you can see, the real-world environment of Singapore, the streets of Singapore, are very much feeding into the students' learning experience in this case. So this is a project which is about developing 21st century skills and also about transforming pedagogy in the context of Singapore's highly successful education system, but one which is sometimes rather hierarchical and competitive. This is a project where the devices are mobile, but so too are the learners and the learning experience. A little bit like the Brazilian project, this is another kind of proof of concept. It shows that it's possible to teach digital literacies and 21st century skills at the same time as teaching other kinds of content and skills, including language. And one of the very interesting techniques often adopted in this project when it comes to language learning is to send students out in multilingual teams to the traditional ethnic areas of Singapore, where they might have to use more than one language to gather the information they need before translating everything back into a matrix language like English or Mandarin. In terms of pedagogy, we are clearly seeing a move here where the learning is becoming active, collaborative, and constructivist, and where it's also situated, embedded, and embodied. Another one of the guest presenters in that World of Mobile Learning course that I mentioned before is Hamid, the CEO of this company, LDR. And I'd like to quote to you something that he said to me earlier this year. This was not actually his presentation for students. It comes from some email correspondence where he was updating me on new trails that LDR is creating, but he's given me permission to share this with you. He's talking here about an adult learning trail. As he says, the new trail is designed for members of the various communities, Chinese, Malay, Indian, etc., to form cross-cultural and intergenerational teams, and to interact and bond with each other by participating in mobile Amazing Race events. The intergenerational element is not so relevant at school level, but the cross-cultural element certainly is. So in this project, again, there is clearly scope for language learning, but there's also scope for community building, and there's scope for cultural and intercultural exploration. In the latest iteration of this project, it's possible for end users to create their own customized mobile learning trails. So that really opens up the possibilities for teachers to create tailored materials for their students to embark on nature, history, and cultural trails. It also opens up the possibility for students to create their own mobile scavenger hunts or mobile treasure hunts around their schools or around the local areas. And of course, while students are composing questions or problems for their peers to solve, they are using language, they are building community, and depending how the task is structured, they could also be exploring cultural issues. Beyond that, there is the opportunity for companies to create situated learning apps to enhance workplace safety and performance, a kind of learning that we sometimes forget about. And once again, as employees are using these situated learning apps, they will be using language, they will be building community, and depending how the apps are structured, they could also be exploring cultural or even intercultural issues. I don't want to suggest for one moment that mobile phones or mobile devices are a panacea and that they will solve all our problems, nor do I want to suggest that they don't bring their own problems with them. For example, I think it's important that we ask questions about the effect that our mobile devices have on culture as we export mobile hardware and mobile software from its cultures of origin into foreign cultures. It's important that we ask questions about the effect of our mobile devices on socioeconomics, about whether they help to narrow the opportunity gap between high socioeconomic status and low socioeconomic status students, or whether in fact they might in some ways contribute to widening that gap. I think it's important that we ask questions about the effect of our mobile devices on the intertwined issues of privacy and surveillance, something I think a lot of people have become very aware of over the last year or so in following the media reports out of the USA about the tussles between the FBI and Apple. I also think it's important that we ask questions about the effects of our mobile devices on our health, on our eyesight, on our posture, on our attention span, and on our sleeping habits. And perhaps most importantly of all, it's important that we ask questions about the effect of our mobile devices on the environment. As we constantly upgrade our phones, and the old ones end up on e-waste heaps like this one, many of them in the developing world, where they are leaching poisonous chemicals into the soil, and where young children are poisoning themselves as they break open these devices in the search for parts to sell. On the brighter side though, I read an article on the aeroplane on the way over here, where it was stated that there is a plan now to make all of the bronze, silver and gold medals at the Tokyo Olympics from disused mobile phones. So perhaps there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Obviously, I've been suggesting today that mobile devices have a lot of advantages when it comes to education, and I believe that is the case. But obviously, we can really capitalize on those advantages better if we face up to the challenges with which they present us. I hope I have gone some way today towards convincing you at least that mobile devices do have an important role to play in supporting learning. I did promise you that at the very end of my presentation, I would once again show you this cheesy photo of myself. As I mentioned earlier, it's a Facebook post, and wrapped up in this post are many of the key things I've been talking to you about this afternoon. So I used the mobile device to take these photos and post them to Facebook, this very iPhone here. There were different types of learning going on, including language learning. My American friend Jackie is living and working in Japan, so it was up to her to decipher the menu and to ask a few questions for clarification to the waitress. I speak no more than 3 or 4 words of Japanese, but I have started learning Chinese. And for those of you who know something about the Japanese and Chinese languages, you'll realize that the Japanese kanji come from traditional Chinese characters. So I was also able to interpret a few bits and pieces of information here and there in the menu and elsewhere in the restaurant. So this was a fun, realistic, situated language learning exercise for both Jackie and myself. It was also community building exercise. You might just be able to read that there were 76 reactions to this post and 3 comments, and each of those comments has multiple replies. So my friends and Jackie's friends, most of whom do not know each other, nevertheless formed a community around this post to discuss the issues that came up there. And of course, given the topic of the post, we were largely talking about culture. So we spoke about globalization and super diversity. We spoke about the barriers that are now arising to globalization and super diversity. We talked about the walls, virtual or real, that may be built between the UK and Europe, between the US and Mexico, around the islands, the South China Sea. And unsurprisingly, perhaps given the topic of the conversation, we finished up discussing Donald Trump. But I'm going to leave it to your imagination what was said. So as I said a moment ago, I hope I've gone some way today towards convincing you that mobile devices do have a lot of potential to support language learning, to support community building, and to support cultural exploration. This is something that we can ask our students to do in conjunction with formal courses of study that they might be undertaking at an educational institution. But as my Facebook example has just shown, this is also something that a lot of us are naturally doing on a daily basis. And I think it's really worthwhile for us as educators drawing our students' attention explicitly to the many possibilities for using their everyday mobile devices in their everyday context to support everyday language learning, everyday community building, and everyday cultural and intercultural exploration. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wow, I think that was inspiring indeed. Very to the point to the themes of the conference, although done through MOL, but to the point. I was inspired, and I started thinking about how to explore all this wisdom. I hope you all feel the same. We have time for just a couple of questions. So if anybody has anything to ask Mark. Too shy. There you are.
No sound?
Yeah, okay.
Please say your name.
Okay. My name is Erica, and I work in Italy. But at a place where I would consider one of your developed world under-resourced places. But beyond that, when you say culture, people tend to, think about what you were pointing out here about Japanese, Israeli restaurants, Japan, etc. But what I keep on going back to in my head is the culture of the classroom. Right. And so much of what you propose is interesting and inspirational, but what I see as one of the biggest hurdles beyond the technological one is the culture, the overall educational culture that exists in countries. And especially if there's a certain culture, I teach at university, so if there's a certain culture through, 12th grade of the end of high school, by the time they get to be, when I try and change that and introduce new pedagogies, it's extremely difficult. So I'd be curious to see what your opinion about how you manage. I mean, we can't go out and change all those cultures, so what can we do about those cultures?
Yeah, look, actually, that's a very good question and a very important one. And interestingly, when I was speaking to both Carla, who runs the project in Brasilia, and to Hundihin, who runs the project in Singapore, they made a very, very similar comment, saying that the first thing you have to do is to change the mindset of the people around you. So that means the educational leadership, and then the teachers who are working potentially with this kind of technology. But beyond that, there's also an element of learner training. As you say, if students have gone through one type of experience for 12 or 13 years, that's what they expect. So it is a big learner training element, even once we convince the educational leadership and the teachers. And I think we just need to be very explicit about what we're doing and why. So to explain to students, this is why we're taking this kind of approach, this is what we're hoping they can get out of it. Allowing a feedback loop where students can comment on what they've learned and how they've learned it. The other thing to say actually is that we need to change the mindset in an even wider circle than that. If we're thinking about school students, we also have to convince the parents, and probably we have to convince the wider society that there's a role for this kind of thing. So I think we have a lot of PR work to do in many senses. I would start with the educational leadership and colleagues, talking to them about what the pedagogical benefits might be. They're the people that are likely to see the benefits most quickly, but then we have to talk to the students, and then we have to get the message out widely as well. But it's going to be a long, slow process, and I think the thing that will perhaps help it most is when there are successful examples at school. There are some, but when there are more successful examples that people have come across, then hopefully that will get the word out and will make it out a lot easier. Thank you for your question, Aaron.
Another question, just there.
Hello, my name is Xenia in Texas. Actually, it's on the same issue because I face the same problem with parents mainly, because every time I mentioned the word Facebook, they were in a shock. So I managed to overpass this problem by, first of all, creating seminars for parents. And once the parents were convinced, and once I had a few success examples, thank God, I managed to create some change. So the parents, for me, because this is a closed community in Cyprus, they were my biggest challenge, not the students. Students were fine. Thank you.
Well, that sounds to me like a very good way to approach this. And you're absolutely right. It will depend on your own individual setting as to where you would start. So I think it would be a different starting point at university level compared to what we're talking about in the community which you're teaching there. Definitely, if you are working with teenagers as you are, or you're working at school level, you're going to need to start with the parents. So convincing them that the sorts of technologies you're using, whether we're talking about the mobile hardware or social media platforms, Facebook and so on, convincing them that there are educational reasons to do this. Of course, I think we all know that there are, but we have to get that message to come there. Yes, sure.
One last one.
I'm Angelos Kostadoulis from Greece. It's not that I have a question to you, just something to bring into the discussion that in some countries mobiles are not allowed in schools. So it's a matter of policy too. What's your opinion about this? What do you foresee in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're quite right, that is an issue. There are countries, there are cities where mobile phones are not able to be used in schools, and then there are individual institutions which have put into place their own bans. So this is where we've really got to start with the leadership, I think. So it's the educational leadership. So if we're talking about a whole country or a city, it's talking to the relevant people, the Department of Education, the Ministry of Education. If it's at institutional level, then it's talking to the principal, the vice principal, or whoever looks after that kind of thing. But in a way, it's another example of the barriers that we come across. And it's about identifying which are the highest barriers, the most important ones to start with in your particular setting. So clearly, if you've got a mobile phone ban.
Let's all thank Mark with a round of applause. Okay, I'm sure we can continue with the discussion and all the interesting aspects that we have heard. We have a coffee break now at the lobby, just as you go outside on the left side before the lobby. And then that is followed by the symposium, starts at 4:30, followed by parallel sessions until 6:30, and then you're all welcome around the lobby for the welcome reception. See you all outside in the lobby area. Thank you.